All right, I think you should be good to go. I'll turn it over to any of the deans if you have a PowerPoint or presentation or something that you want to share. Otherwise, we can open it up to student questions.
Okay, well, this is Donald Hall. I'm Dean of Faculty of Art Sciences and Engineering, and thank you. It's always a pleasure to come and visit the SA. So I want to just let you know that I've brought with me a few of my colleagues. Jeff Runner, who's the Dean of the College, that's everything involving the undergraduate operations at the university. Rob Alexander, I want to introduce. He is the new Dean of Admissions, Financial Aid, and Enrollment. He is, if those of you who've been here for a while, if you remember John Burdick, we hired Rob last year in the position that John Burdick formerly held. And I've also brought our Director of Financial Aid, Sam Veeder, who will be answering questions that you may have about financial aid. So my part in this is just to sort of let you know that something that you heard about, I think, through Read This, and that is that the tuition next year will go up very, very minimally. We are looking at a 1.9% tuition increase, which is historically the lowest that we've ever done. Our expenses are actually going up about 5%, but we thought this year it was not a year to try to do much around tuition. But we did have the Board of Trustees approve a very small increase. The major drivers, just so you know, behind our expense increases, and this is something you may have heard about in the national news and local news, the University of Rochester is committed to moving all of its employees toward a minimum wage of $15 an hour. We are doing that in a couple of steps, one by the end of this year, 2021, and then half again next year, 2022. So that is going to add about between $3 and $4 million to our expenses. What happens when you raise everyone to a $15 minimum wage is anyone who is currently at $15 an hour, or let's say $15.25 an hour, who were supervising people at $13 an hour, have to be raised proportionally. That's called, as many of you may know, wage compression. And so that is driving a big part of our increase in expenses this year. But as we always do, we are raising financial aid fully to cover that. So our financial aid next year will be going up actually by over 3% to about $147 million for the total financial aid budget. So everyone's financial aid that is need-based aid will be adjusted completely to cover the tuition increase. The only thing that does not get adjusted is merit-based aid. So we are, I think, feeling okay about where we landed on tuition next year, given the fact that because of our increase in expenses, the other alternative would have been obviously to try to cut our personnel, and we certainly didn't want to try to lay off anyone or do anything else that would cause economic hardship when we're actually trying to work to make people's lives better. So that was just a brief overview. Like I said, it's not big news. Most of you have heard about it already. But if you have questions for me, or if you have questions for Sam Veeder about financial aid specifically, or Rob, you may want to ask him anything about his perspective on recruiting students to the University of Rochester, or what it looks like for next fall, because he is in the middle of recruiting a first-year class for fall of 2021. Or certainly Jeff is here to answer any questions about student services or advising or any of the other things that the college, is in the business of providing. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think we can open it up to student questions with just putting your name in the chat, and then we'll go in the order of the names. So if you have a question, just put it in the chat and then we'll go from there. Start with Justina, President Gorka.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, hi, Justina.
Hi, Dean Hall. So I know this is kind of a talking point with the financial burdens that students are facing, because of parents either getting laid off of work, budget cuts. I'm thinking I feel like all the students on this call can relate to this because we've all had our individual concerns, but also incoming students. I was wondering, what are we going to be doing to help support those students that now all of a sudden are going to be trying to enter college and they have less money to really, work with? Will we be meeting them halfway? How is financial aid potentially helping to cover students' tuition needs?
I'll turn it over to Sam, but just very briefly as a preface, certainly if anyone's financial situation changes, Sam is dealing with a lot of financial aid appeals right now, so she can speak to that. And for the incoming students, they are, their financial aid is based on their family situation as it is. And if the parents have been laid off or there are other stressors on the family, that goes into the consideration. But Sam, why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Justina, and thank you, Donald. We do have that appeal process available. We are seeing significantly more appeals than normal based on the fact that many families are being negatively impacted due to COVID, their household finances. And we do have some funding available from the Higher Education Relief Fund. The first round of CARES Act funding was distributed almost a year ago to all eligible students. And we do have a second round that we do have available to help families who are facing financial setbacks related to COVID. And they can apply for those funds or work with their financial aid officer through the financial aid application and/or appeal process.
I guess kind of a quick follow-up question to that. For appeals, is there a strict timeline that students need to get those submitted in by? Can they be reviewed retroactively, if circumstances change? I know that budgeting, and financial aid, right now is something that's getting finalized. You need to submit all your records in. So I just kind of wanted more clarity on that so students know.
Yeah, what's the timeline, Sam? The timeline?
Yeah, there's not really a deadline. I mean, we have funding available for this current year for the spring semester for families who might be facing a change now. For families who are really seeing a hit in 2021 income, it's likely that we won't be able to address that until the 2021-22 school year application. But we do have some funding available both for this spring, so we can handle those appeals through the rest of the semester. And we do also have significant amount of funding available for those families who might appeal for the 2021-22 school year. And sometimes it might be best for the student to have a conversation with their financial aid counselor because everyone's circumstances are so unique, and the counselor will review the family's information and how their finances have changed, and we will work with them to put them in the best situation, meaning if it's more beneficial for them to have the appeal done in the fall of 2021 than this spring, then we will review it that way.
That's good to hear. Thanks. That's all my questions for right now.
All right, says Chair Garcia.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I guess this question is mainly directed towards Rob Alexander. First off, welcome. I was close with Dean Burdick, but I have yet to meet you, so welcome. But I guess looking forward into the rest of this semester, are there, I know accepted students days are a thing, and as well as tours were always very popular around this time. What is admissions kind of doing to help incoming students kind of have those experiences?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And thank you everybody for having me here. I look forward to getting to know many of you. And I put my email address in the chat. Some of you have already been in touch via email, but I look forward to more contact with all of you. So because frankly, we have really top professionals working as our regional admission counselors, as well as a very senior international admissions staff, the team was able to pivot very smoothly into the virtual recruitment space a year ago. Over this last recruitment cycle, there have been more individual touch points with prospective students than ever before, despite not having those interactions occur in person. So the campus remains closed to prospective student visitors, but as we get ready to launch our regular decision admission offers, we are also preparing to invite admitted students and their parents to well over 50 individual virtual events. We have special events just for parents. We had a record year in terms of alumni doing prospective student application interviews. So we're very confident that we've been a leader in the space in terms of using the virtual tools that we have. We've also beefed up our technology for our virtual visit and the virtual tour that we have available. I, in fact, was walking campus yesterday, testing it out. So we continue to innovate there, and we look forward to, as soon as both state guidance and our own university coronavirus response team guidance allows, to welcome prospective students back to campus, but in an effort really to continue to protect all of you and the faculty who are in person, we have remained closed to visitors. But we hope that that will open up. Whether that will be before May 3rd, when students have to make their decision, or not, remains to be seen. But perhaps over the summer, as vaccination occurs much more widely, I think that's when we'll absolutely be able to turn that corner and resume some kind of visitation program. We've, in general, just to give you the update, we've seen an applicant pool pretty similar to last year. As many of you know, we were test optional before it was cool. And that, I think, helped boost our applications last year and carry through into this year. Many of the other highly selective institutions, to which I'm sure many of you applied, they switched to test optional this year and saw a big bump in their applications. Our pool is much more stable. We think that's going to be okay, but we're being conservative in trying to build our class for next year. We already have around 600 early decision students that we're holding on to, and about to release our regular decision students decisions, and then really be in that work of yielding these students over the next month and a half. We'll also have a waiting list, and this is a year when many schools are expected to have deep waiting lists because the market is so volatile. So we'll see whether we have to utilize that waiting list or not. We do have Meridians and other current students engaged in a number of these kinds of events, as well as on our Facebook page for the admitted student class of page. So that is happening, and we've got a parents of as well as we've had a number of great student takeovers for our Instagram page. So if any of you are interested in doing any of that, you can absolutely let me know, and we'll make sure that we inject your energy into this process.
Thank you.
All right, Blaine, Senator Dillingham.
I have a question for financial aid. I wanted to understand some of the office's incentives when it comes to those financial aid appeals and just in general generosity of the financial aid package. Is there a pool of money that you guys have out of tuition to help students with financial need, and then you get rewarded if you're able to, save up that pool for future years? I get that you have to have kind of a rainy day fund, I would imagine. But at the same time, if you have leftover money, in order to be able to give money in those appeals, if you have a year where you're low on appeals and so there's some extra surplus, I'd love to know where that goes and how individual financial aid officers who are making these calls about appeals, how their incentives are set up.
Well, there are no incentives built into the process whatsoever. We use a budget process at the college with Dean Hall and people in the budget office. And we plan based on the needs of our current students and them returning year over year. We have a pretty sophisticated budget process that actually does a really good job of accurately building and predicting the amount of financial aid we will need each year to honor our commitment to students, to continuing to meet their full demonstrated need and renewing their merit scholarship eligibility. So I've been here 5 years, and we, don't have a year where there's something left over at the end. And, in fact, usually sometimes we spend more than what we had budgeted for a various number of reasons. And
I would say that Sam always comes to me for more money, and I always give it to her. I always give it to her, but yes, they haven't had a year where she's had money.
But right now we do have some, federal funding due to COVID that is helping us also, in addition to the university's commitment, the college's commitment, is helping us work with those families that have been particularly financially impacted due to the pandemic.
Thank you.
All right, Micah.
I'd like to add one more, I think, about your question there. And just, you had mentioned about the individual counselor's decision. Really, it is a committee. There's no individual counselor in the financial aid office that has the authority on their own to kind of make a decision like that. We do have policies at the college, and they review those applications and materials, but we do have an appeals committee that includes the whole team as well as leadership that reviews those appeal requests, just to be clear.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification.
Go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, so as background, I'm a senior, so I don't really have much of a stake in this. But I was sort of wondering, Rob Alexander sort of said that the market is so volatile, and I think that the implication of that is sort of, we don't quite know what next year will look like. And I was sort of wondering, what the current thinking of what next year will look like is, because that plays an important role in both whether students, decide to come back and whether students decide to come back in person for room and board funds. All of those things. I'm sort of wondering if there's any information about that. I'm not really expecting to get much of an answer, but just wondering.
Let me say that we are, that we do know that students are applying to more schools than ever before. Where students may have applied, prospective students applied to, 5 or 10 schools. Now they're applying to 15 or 18 schools. And so Rob and I work all the time on modeling on what that would mean in terms of, how many acceptances do you send out to try to hit a first year class of about 1,350, because we really want to make sure we have available dormitory space for all the students. But Rob, why don't you talk a little bit more about how the sausage is made?
Sure. So in a typical year, we would utilize a running 3-year average of yield. It is a crazy spreadsheet, Alexander,
Yeah.
with those in columns and then rows with all sorts of different slices of the class that tend to yield. That means our win rate, how many admitted students actually choose to come to the University of Rochester. Those yield rates vary widely depending on geography, on majors, on students and their families' financial situations, on their academic preparedness. So in a typical year, a running 3-year average would give us a pretty good projection of what the future would look like. This year, we really don't think that past will be predictive. So we're using last year's yield and then an extra layer of conservative planning on top of that. The entire landscape of enrollment officers at every school out there is very unsure. The truth is, though, that most schools don't have any more room than they would have. So I don't think we're going to see completely different kinds of students admitted this year than would have been admitted at school X, Y, or Z in past years. So we're hopeful that overall things will begin to stabilize. When we really look ahead, I think part of what you're asking is, do we expect next year to look more normal? And are we planning for a return to kind of in-person normalcy? And certainly as the vaccine continues to roll out, and as I talk to admitted and soon to be admitted students, I'm certainly trying to reassure them that I think their start to college, wherever they enroll, will be much closer to pre-pandemic normalcy than this year's cohort of entering first-year students. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was basically going to follow up and say, like, especially the housing lottery, I'm sure, is something that will be coming up the next couple of months, and I was wondering sort of what information will be given out to students before they make the decision of, you know, what to plan for that.
Actually, I think we're going to be going back to the normal assumption about housing capacity with doubles and singles as they would normally have been pre-COVID, with the idea that if for some reason things aren't kind of back to normal by fall, we would have to pivot back like we have in the past. But that is the current plan. And so I'm thinking actually probably in a couple of weeks, there'll be some movement in the lottery space.
The truth is, I don't need to go to Las Vegas or Atlantic City or do any gambling outside of what my profession has crazily involved. The choices and desires of 17-year-olds takes care of all my risk-taking needs in my personal and professional life.
Sure. Thanks, everyone.
All right, Justina, President Group.
Love that. Okay. So I have 3 questions. I'm going to start off with the simpler ones first. And it's kind of a follow-up to something, Dean Alexander, that you mentioned about admitted students, kind of, you know, making sure that once people decide to actually enroll the U of R, like, how do we shift them to like the campus culture? And I was curious, like, what's the likelihood of, 1, like there being summer programs, and 2, an in-person orientation, or maybe an orientation a little bit different from what we've seen so far? I'm just thinking of, you know, how we've had like a lot of mixed reviews of how people thought the orientation went last year, and how there's some members of the freshman class that don't feel, you know, really prepared and in tune with the campus resources and what's available. So I was wondering if there was something that you could share with us on that, or if there was any talking at all happening on that.
Sure, there's lots of planning and coordination across admissions, financial aid, orientation, housing, academic advising, the Green Center, to very intentionally try to, instead of have a hard stop of when admissions ceases and the current student services begin, and instead kind of thread those together. Honestly, I think what we're planning for this summer of 21 will really be less of a look back of what we did either last year or even pre-COVID. And I think it's more laying the foundation for what is going to become best practice going forward, where there are things that we absolutely can do more effectively via Zoom or asynchronously during the summer months leading up to an in-person and robust and really fun and interactive on-campus orientation and onboarding experience. So I think we're trying to design that future now in a way that's going to be best for students. Obviously, the new advising model presents some great advantages to making some of those linkages. I think the experiences that everyone at Rochester had last year has absolutely informed them about what they want to do differently building this year. And I'm hearing a lot of early planning and very good ideas as we build that out right now.
Perfect, thanks. Next question I had is there anywhere on our websites that you could, you know, link to how the tuition breakdown is? I know in the past, I believe that there were some URL links shared. So just for the record now, if there was anything that we could then share along for people that couldn't make this meeting, and also just through our social media platforms advertise? Like, is there anything that we can share?
Sure. Yeah, there was a press release that went out a few days ago, and so let me get that to you. I may even be able to turn off my camera and search for it real fast. But yeah, we can. I'll definitely get that to you.
Okay, that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Justina, I believe we've already updated the financial aid handbook for 21-22 as well. That's on the financial aid website. Now that's not going to have the complete breakdown in, maybe all of the dorms. We kind of categorize them, but it will have the bulk of the major expenses.
I just put the first link that pops up that has the basic information in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Got to it before I did.
Perfect. I'm saving that for myself for later. Into the PR chairs. Okay, perfect. And then my last question was just kind of a reaffirmation of, your the marks at the start, specifically on, reasoning why we were having an increase of tuition. Hold on. I'm trying to get back to the Zoom call. There we go. Oh,
yeah.
We're sharing it.
Yeah. You can, yeah, there it is.
Well, okay. Onto what I was trying to articulate. It was a 1.9% increase, you said, in the tuition from last year. I know that you mentioned the fact that, minimum wage is increasing, so we're trying to accommodate that. There's going to be a 4 million, window we have to fill. Is there any other points that are, causing our tuition to go up? Because I'm just trying to compare like this year to last year,
Sure. We're trying to ramp back up because we had major cuts in some of our areas, such as student services, in our career center, in our mental health services. I mean, there were a lot of places that we had vacancies that had built up that we did not fill last year. So we're trying to really, increase our, investment in all things related to student services. We have, we're looking at about a 1.9 or, between a 1 and 2% increase in our libraries. So the library costs are going up because mostly of subscription costs. And we're looking at then the continued investment in our technological systems like UR Student, as well as some of the underlying financial systems. And those are going up by about 5%. So those are all the major cost drivers. But again, we're trying not to pass most of those along. So that's why, even though our expenses are going up overall in an aggregate by 5%, we're only doing about a 1.9% in tuition. And tuition, I should say, covers about 70% of our budget. And then the other 30% has to do with overhead off of our research enterprise.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Typhoon, parliamentarian sign.
Does Connor need to go?
No, he rescinded his part.
Okay. So my question was if in the current semester and also projected in the future semester, if any money is being withdrawn from the endowment as we currently stand.
No, thank you. And we have had a long continuing conversation with our Board of Trustees. We're governed by a Board of Trustees at the university. We're not spending any of our principal. So the question is whether off of the proceeds of the endowment, if we spend all of the proceeds or we try to reinvest it in the endowment. Currently, we're still approved to pull about pull at a rate of 5.9% out of our endowment, which is high compared to other universities. And if the endowment's doing well, if it's gaining 6 or 7%, that means we can continue to reinvest in the endowment. But if you hit a bad year and it goes down, well, then you're actually pulling more than you're actually earning. But right now we're going to keep it level from year to year, which is at about a 5.9% draw off of the proceeds from the endowment, but we're not touching the principal at all.
Okay. And so also follow-up question, in terms of like the libraries and maybe other departments or schools that are budgeted at least for this semester, are they also going to be facing budget cuts for future semesters? Because I know that one of the things that's annoying me the most is how, you know, myself and students aren't necessarily getting a discount for tuition, but there's still cuts in the academic services like library hours. And so, yeah, my question is, are those budget cuts and reduced services still anticipated in future semesters?
We don't think so. No, actually, we think, especially around the library, that many of the cuts in the library or the cost savings had to do with, again, the pandemic completely, and the you know, really the cash flow issue around the pandemic. But we anticipate in fall that the libraries in all of our other services will be back to 100%. And Jeff, I don't know if you have anything to say in terms of the other, you know, specific services that in the college student services.
Yeah, that's right. I think pretty much any of the contraction that we've seen has been because of COVID. And we are really hoping going forward to kind of get things back to normal with the offices open, fully staffed, and ready to go.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
All right, Fred.
Hey, yes. So I just have like a couple questions regarding like tuition increase as well. Is that I mean, as you've said like before, we're basically going back to normal, but at the same time, we're cutting a lot of these benefits that we had before, like library hours and all that sorts. With all these like budget cuts, why do we still have a tuition increase? Like I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, the budget cuts really were from last year, because when we had so many students, for instance, who moved out of the dormitories because around, you know, COVID last year and then through this year, we've only been at about 75% occupancy in our dormitories, and we refunded a lot of money having to do with the room costs last year. So cuts were only for last year and this year that we're in right now. Once we get back, I think, as Rob said, we're expecting a completely normal fall semester, you know, knock wood, because we think everyone's going to be vaccinated by the end of June. And so we think all of that's going to be restored completely. You know, all the hours will be back, all the counselors will be back, all of the services will be back. So that's why, you know, because we are expecting everyone to be back, and we're also, as I said, trying to move toward this living wage for all of our lowest paid workers. That's why we've got an increase.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and one other question is, what are like the progress on the Gleason project? I know we were trying to renovate Gleason last year.
Yeah, no, we just had a meeting on that about a week or so ago. And Jeff, if I remember correctly, that's going to happen this summer, isn't that correct?
That's right. It's going to be finished over the summer.
Yeah, so they're going to totally renovate.
It's going to be lovely.
You know, so gut reno Gleason. Yeah, finally after,
okay, that's cool.
After 40 years. Yes, it's been 40 years.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah, and Studio X is going to be, yeah, Justina just put it in the chat. Yeah, Studio X should be up fully functional and renovated also by fall semester. And Carlson, yes. So we got a lot going on.
Carlson's the 40-year one. Gleason was done 15.
Oh, okay. Gleason's been done more recently. Carlson was 40-year. Yeah, Gleason's only been like 20.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bethany, you had a question?
Yes, I was just wondering if there was any grants or scholarships available for COVID relief just for U of R students.
Sam, talk about the, what's happening, both the previous COVID relief bills from Congress as well as stuff coming up.
Sure. So last March, Congress passed the first round of higher education funding called the CARES Act, and distributed some funding to schools to be awarded as grants to students who are eligible. And when Congress passed that bill, part of that eligibility required that those students meet all of the eligibility requirements in Section 484 of the Higher Education Act, and including filing a FAFSA, including citizenship. And so that first round of funding that became available last spring, we distributed in checks to all eligible students at the university. We just recently got a second round of that funding, and that is what is available. There's a portion of that available for grants for students whose families or who they personally are facing financial setbacks due to COVID. They can apply through the appeal process in the financial aid office for consideration for those grant fundings in the second round, which is the CRRSAA, the second round of the higher education funding. And soon to be, President Biden just signed a third round, which we really don't have a lot of details on yet. And we'll know more in the coming weeks about that funding and how that might be available. But a portion of that will also be available for us to award to grants to students as well who might be facing financial setbacks from the pandemic.
Okay, so that's like through need-based aid that you wouldn't apply for, that's just given?
You would, this round is going to be through need-based financial aid and through the appeal process. So if you are facing a financial setback due to the pandemic in your household, you should be in contact with your financial aid officer to discuss the specifics about your situation. And then you can use the appeal process to provide documentation about that situation to see how we can determine eligibility for a portion of that funding.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Seke?
Hi, my name is Seke. This is a question for Rob Alexander. I'm actually a Meridian and an interviewer for admissions, and so I wanted to find out if the composition of students next year is going to change in any way in regards to international students. Will we see an increase of them, a decrease of them? Because that was a big reason why I joined the school, and talking to prospective students, that's a big reason why they are interested in the school.
Well, first, let me say thank you for your great work on our behalf. And I will tell you that the richness and diversity of our student body is one of the absolute distinctive strengths of the University of Rochester. So certainly we are headed into a future where we are very hopeful that we will have robust and diverse student enrollment that will continue. Obviously, there are, number one, our own plans and attempts to recruit fantastic students from all over the world. And then there are the virus's plans, and then there are the visa and immigration issues, only some of which we and even our United States administration in Washington, D.C. have control over. So we're facing a number of elements of volatility, but certainly our aim is to continue a very robust international student enrollment in line with, or maybe even slightly above, our institutional peers.
Yeah, let me just add to that, because this is something Rob and I talk about a lot, because my background, I've lived all over the world, I've taught all over the world, I've taught in China, I've taught in Rwanda, and lectured, in a lot of different countries. And I think that is one of the fundamental sort of commitments we have, is to an internationally globalized and internationally vibrant campus. And so, I think that it is just clear that we're always going to look at a portion of the student population, somewhere between 20 and 30% on this campus, that comes from everywhere from South America to Sub-Saharan Africa to East Asia to South Asia So no, I think that's one of the things that we hold commonly as just a fundamental value.
Okay, thank you very much. And as a follow-up, will there be resources basically for students who can't come back onto campus because of however virus plans are moving?
Yes, we're already letting professors know that students may be delayed this fall. We're hoping to get as many people back as possible. I mean, we certainly think that ideally by August, embassies will be open, consulates will be open, and people will be getting visas and flights in. But yes, we've let people know that if students cannot arrive, everyone has to make available their classes online as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much to everyone from the University Administration that has come and shared some great answers and perspectives, so thank you. And if there are any additional questions, I believe Dean Alexander put his email in the chat, and we can follow up on our social media as well with some of the ways that if students have questions after the call that they can still ask them.
Okay, thank you all very much, and we have a great evening.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
a lot.
Much.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, we can now move into the Senate agenda. So I will call to order the Senate meeting of March 15th, 2021. Would the Deputy Speaker please take attendance?
Yes. Senator Ari Narkin is absent. Senator Bile is absent. Senator Chin.
Here.
Senator Savicevich. I'm sorry.
Present.
Senator Dillingham.
Here.
Senator Fibres Cordero.
Here.
Senator Fuchs.
Here.
Senator Hathaway.
Here.
Senator Ramirez is absent. Senator Sorkin.
Right here.
Senator Thomas.
Present.
Senator Yoon.
Here.
9 present, 3 absent.
All right, we can go ahead and do the land acknowledgement before we do the Genesee. So would a senator like to read the land acknowledgement? Senator Hathaway.
We would like to acknowledge with respect to the Seneca Nation, known as the Great Hill People and keepers of the western door of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers on whose ancestral lands the University of Rochester currently resides in Rochester, New York.
All right, thank you. We will now move into the Genesee, featuring another special guest who will be assisting and singing the Genesee. Hang on just a moment while I pull up the chords. All right, we're just going to wing it.
I might make up the chords. We'll see.
Full many fair and famous streams beneath the sun there be, yet more to us than any seems our own dear Genesee. We love her banks and stately falls, for to our minds they bring our dear alma mater's house where sweetest happy spring, as flows the river
by day.
All right, we'll now move into open forum. Are there any points of discussion for open forum? Seeing none, we will go to discussion on general updates from the past week. Would anyone like to discuss anything?
Hi, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, great. So hi, my name is Seki, in case you don't know me, and I'm the Secretary of Alumni Advancement. And today marks the beginning of Together for Rochester for Students, which has officially launched. So you can follow. Can you hear me? Like thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay, great. Thank you. Yes. So you can check the website and see if there's any updates. You can also follow the rules or the rules that we have for winning prizes. There's a lot of really cool prizes that you can win that are limited edition for this year. But if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and ask any questions that you may have. Sorry about the mic problems.
All right, is there any other discussion? Is my audio back?
Your audio is very quiet, Alexander.
What about now? Any better? Still nothing? What about now? Is this any better?
Yeah.
Great. When in doubt, plug it back in again, right? Restart. Is there any other discussion for updates, projects, initiatives? If not, I can turn it over to President Gorka about coronavirus related stuff, current student updates, if you have anything to share on that.
Sure. Are you updates written? Can you scroll down for me a bit? Perfect. So I tried to summarize as best as I could from our call on Friday. We came with a couple of concerns from within SA, but also externally that we were seeing on social media platforms just to get some things straight. And it seems like a lot of it is miscommunication specifically. So trying to better emphasize specific relevant student groups, making sure that things around isolation and as well as, false positive rates for PCR versus rapid testing is emphasized so that there's no like mass panic because again, cases are rising. I don't want to go through all the points one by one, but if anybody had any questions or if Connor or Xander, you wanted to emphasize something in particular from that meeting, feel free, but.
Yeah, I just have, I think, two things to emphasize. The first of them is on the testing regime. So one thing we identified is that tests aren't really effective until 4 or 5 days. That's when they have high confidence. So instantly testing someone doesn't actually provide as much confidence as we want it to be. We want it to be a clear gold standard. You either are positive or you are negative. Unfortunately, even PCR doesn't get us to that level. So that's why there's a more holistic determination for whether someone is positive or not, and whether someone needs to be isolated or quarantined than just simple testing. The second thing, and I'll talk about this in my updates too, is that guest policy change implementation is going to be delayed a week. Well, I mentioned that to Senate through a private message earlier. But but that's just to confirm. There was also a Res Life email about it. But the important thing there is that I am collecting any sort of input, comments, concerns, questions, anything that you want to write, any of your thoughts would be really, really appreciated if you could just send them to sa_chiefjustice@u.rochester.edu. I actively monitor that account. My job is to take all student input, put it all into one document, summarize it, make sure that it's somewhat anonymized. So your input will be anonymized, and then make sure it gets to the right place. So please, please, please email that account. Even if you think that your opinions are redundant, even if you think that everyone else has the same opinions as you, please send stuff to that account. That's all.
All right, is there any other discussion? Any additional questions based on what's here? All right, then we can move into new business. Is there a motion? Senator Hathaway.
Motion to approve the minutes from 3/8/21.
Is there a second on that motion?
I second the motion.
All right, Senator Thomas. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, we will vote by unanimous consent. Is there any dissent on approving the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, motion passes. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve amendment proposal number 2.
All right, is there a second on that motion? Is there a second on that motion?
Yes, I second the motion.
All right. Was that Senator Chin? I couldn't tell who was. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right, I can turn it over to Typhoon, I guess, if you want to speak a little bit about the amendment process and what the amendment proposal entails.
Sure. So I'll give a little bit of a longer introduction at first, and then just talk about specifically this amendment being voted on. So I'll start a little bit at the beginning. So I'm gonna take 5, and so I think when I was a first year back in 2016 of fall, there was a constitutional task force because we had identified that there were lots of problems with our Constitution. And unfortunately, that task force, to put it mildly, crashed and burned. It was not great. And so we have lots of problems, but we haven't done anything between then and now, like 5 years, to just try to fix things that are uncontentious. I think that task force was talking about broad structural reform that unfortunately there wasn't enough agreement on. So there's 3 areas generally that are being proposed here for fixes. One of them is allowing a more flexible number of members on ACJC as one amendment. The next amendment would be making sure that the selections, elections, and appointments process for numerous government officials is constitutional, because unfortunately not enough of them are. And then the last amendment would be specific wording changes, since there's a number of things that are ambiguous, and also
so
yeah, I think that's general review. So then I'm going to now specifically introduce, I think, the amendment that was within the motion. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. I was just going to reframe in terms of which is exactly what you're going to do. So great.
Yeah. So the amendment proposal 2 is just changing one part of Article 4, Section 2 to say that, quote, the justices of the council can hold their terms or can hold their offices for the term of their enrollment at the college, and a justice may retain their office even if they do not pay the student activities fee for one semester. The council will consist of an odd number of justices that is no fewer than 9 and no greater than 15. So in terms of what's being actually added or like amended to the Constitution, you can scroll down to Appendix A, and it will clarify that for you. So presently, ACJC justices still do keep their seat, even if they don't pay the student activities fee for a semester, like if they go on to study abroad. But ideally, it would be the case where it's still constitutional for them to keep their seat. And then the other update, again, like I said, allows ACJC to balance its workload. I think that about covers it, but let me know if there's any questions.
All right. Is there any additional discussion, questions, comments? Does anyone need additional time to read the document? We do have a member in the gallery if someone wants to yield to them. Senator Hathaway.
I yield to Micah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that, I mean, a lot of you are senators who are sort of newer here, so I just wanted to make sure that people sort of understand both the process of amendments, which I think is something that you all should talk about, and sort of what the history of amendments are. So just for example, the fact that, like I'm guessing a lot of you don't know that the reason why they say number 2, 3, and 4 is that there's already been one amendment, and that was passed like 3 years ago, I want to say, dealing with gendered organizations. But I think that it's basically, I'm just trying to tell you to talk this out because it's an important thing that is has long-term implications for SA for years to come. And just it's okay to ask questions and to not know what's going on exactly, but to take this seriously. That's it.
Senator Hathaway, you have the floor.
I yield.
Senator Thomas.
So I have a few questions. So I guess, can you elaborate why now versus like why not in the future, and why do these individual changes for all of them versus like doing a combined thing? I know that we've like discussed it, but I want the senators to hear your answers and spark some communication. So I yield to Parliamentarian Sahin.
Yeah, so I think that when I first proposed this to SA leadership, I actually had it as one larger amendment. I thought that all of it seemed uncontentious, and that we could just propose it to students as one thing. I think that where I was coming from historically, I had previously proposed an amendment with Senator Kamel Oweda, great guy. And unfortunately it didn't pass because there were concerns from Senate about like having 2 amendments on the ballot instead of just one. And that was the same year that there was gender exclusive organizations and that whole crisis. So that was where I was coming from. That being said, I realized that when I did break up the amendments into different parts, it made it actually quite easy to understand the different topics and what was actually changing within each amendment. So like one of them is about ACJC, another one's about selections, elections, appointments. The other one's about clarifying wording. So that's kind of why ultimately it fell the way it did in terms of breaking it up into 3. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Connor, how do you feel about this? Is this something that you as like Chief Justice would want to see?
Yeah, frankly, this is a pretty big solution to a problem we've been facing it's a structural problem over the past 2 to 3 years. Since I became Chief Justice, our workload on BAH has more than doubled, with the same number of justices having to fill in a much larger number of slots. And so this would help make that workload sustainable. And that's just the specific BAH workload. It spills off into other areas, right? So conduct, which we've had a larger role in this year. Constitutional appeals, which also increased last year. Things like that would be really, it helps us make sure that we can properly staff things without burning out our justices. And the flexibility part is the really important thing there. Yeah, I'll end it there. I think Sam, who's a justice, can also speak more about it if he wants to, but he's been taking point on that group.
If Sam wants to add to that, he can.
Yeah, I'll add in here. Just this is pretty essential if ACJC is going to continue to function the way it has been. Yeah.
Cool. And then I just had one kind of like procedural question. So it's going to have to go and the student body is going to have to vote on it. Yes, correct. What's the threshold that has to be reached, in order for this to pass? Is it just a simple majority or 2/3? I yield to majority. Okay, cool. That was easy. And then I'm also going to, is Sam still on the speakers list or? Yeah, okay, I'm going to yield back to Justice Smith.
Okay, I don't know any procedure here, folks. Who should I yield to? Am I speaking?
Yeah, I think you were yielded to if you wanted to add anything to additional to what you shared.
No, not really. I think that covers it. Yeah.
Cool. Then I'm going to yield to Micah Greenberg.
Yeah, just one more thing, which is a question that probably might take you down a rabbit hole. So feel free to hold off on it if you want to. But my question was sort of just procedurally what the plan would be for the rules around campaigning in favor or against these amendments if they were to pass Senate when they're put on the ballot, and then also around how they're advertised to students and SA's involvement in getting out information about what the amendments are in a nonpartisan way.
Is that to me or?
Yeah, I yield to whoever wants to answer that.
I can answer partly. So, I mean, it is going to, of course, rely as well a little bit on SA leadership or the director of PR, or secretary of PR, but there's a newsletter coming up that could be added to so that it's sent out to students, and as well it could be posted on social media and our Facebook page and things like that. And also, I think it's a little bit incumbent upon all senators to try to post it on their social media so that students are aware of this. I think that some simple steps like that can go a long way. I yield.
Senator Thomas, can I ask that you yield and to move down the speakers list?
Yeah, I'm good. I yield.
Okay. Senator Sorokin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to be really short and just say that all of these three amendments, not just the one we're discussing right now, all three of them, they are very, very important to make sure that the Constitution is pretty much reflecting the way how we operate and everything. And it is also they're very essential in, making sure they are pretty much refreshing the Constitution we're currently having. So yeah, I just want to kind of say that it is very, the all three amendments here, they are very important, and that'd be great if we all vote tonight to approve them. Yep, I yield back to the floor.
All right, Senator Febres Cordero.
I'm not sure if this was like specified before, but so I want to make sure, how would this appear in elections? Like, what would the students see when they're voting for this if it gets approved? Because I feel that if they see what I'm seeing now, which is the first two sentences get changed to that, that's not enough. I mean, I want to know what they will see, because I would think that for a fair assessment of the voters, like the student body, they need to see what's the original text and what it is being changed to, right? And I don't feel confident. I mean, I'm in favor of this fully, but I don't feel confident in voting for this if I don't get a guarantee that the students will see what specifically is being changed for what. I yield.
All right, Parliamentarian Sahin, go ahead if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, thanks. So I think that if I recall correctly, the gender exclusivity waiver had a like just like a short description of what the amendment accomplished, and then there was a link to what the actual amendment was if someone wanted to read like the full text of it. But I think that in a similar way, one, I tried to make the amendment titles to generally capture the purpose of it, but I also support that, you know, if we aren't able to show the original and new, that at least we're able to have a description of, you know, here's what's being accomplished in it. So for Amendment 2, it would be, you know, the current ACJC membership is established at 11, and this would permit it to be anywhere from 9 to 15 members. And then say there's one wording clarification, and then, you know, see this link for more details if you'd like. Something like that. I'm more than happy. I mean, I think that if these pass, I'm more than happy to develop specific descriptions in the Elections and Rules Committee this upcoming week. And then also speak with Fred, since unfortunately he's not here, as elections coordinator, and then bring them to the Senate so that you all can approve them and make sure that you feel that it's an accurate representation and students are aware of what they're voting on. All right, I yield.
All right, is there any other discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we will move into a vote by roll call when the deputy speaker is ready. Just as a reminder, a yes vote is approving this motion and moving it to the student body on the ballot, and then a no vote is to not move it to the student body, and then an abstention is a conflict of interest or otherwise non-yes or no vote. And I believe, I have to confirm with Parliamentarian Sahin, but I believe the threshold is 3/4 of the entire Senate. Given the current amount of senators, which is 12, that would be 8. And we currently have 8 at this meeting, I believe.
We have 9.
We have 9, okay.
Okay, so I think looked a little bit into this. So since the SA Constitution mimics the US Constitution in this regard when it says 3/4 of the body, so the US Supreme Court has actually ruled on that when 3/4 of the body, what they meant as well, at least when it said 2/3 of each chamber in the US Constitution, it just means that it's that threshold of people who are present have to vote yes. So that would be 3/4 of the people who are present have to vote yes. That being said, you're speaker, so you can still interpret how you'd like, but I did send you, I think a few weeks ago, you know, a document with my reasoning, a link to the US Supreme Court decision, And that's my take on it.
Just as a note, we do not follow SCOTUS precedent. But
No,
yeah,
no, but we literally are copied from it. And that decision,
I understand,
SCOTUS was many years before.
So we are going to move into the voting point by roll call, and then we will announce the vote tallies afterward. Does anyone have any questions before we start about what a yes, no, or abstain vote means?
Senator, for Perez Cordero, are you just like still raising your hand from before, or do you have a question?
It was from before.
That was an off-hand comment. Don't worry.
All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay, Senator Aranarkin is absent. Senator Bile is absent. Senator Chin.
I vote.
Okay. Senator Svetojevic.
Yes.
Senator Dillingham.
Yes.
Senator Febres Cordero.
Aye.
Senator Fuchs.
Yes.
Senator Hathaway.
Yes.
Senator Ramirez is absent. Senator Sorkin.
Aye.
Senator Thomas.
Yeah.
Senator Yoon.
Yes.
9 yeses, 3 abstentions.
All right, the motion passes. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve amendment proposal number 3.
Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
All right, Senator Hathaway. We will move into discussion. I can turn it over to Parliamentarian Sahin if you want to explain again.
Right. So I do want to also be very upfront. From the time that this passed hearing last night till now, there was, I think, a few technical changes. So I think that the Constitution that's up on the SA website is slightly modified. So Article 1, as in our official Constitution, does not have section numbers. So I did have to modify that aspect of it since I referred to a section within Article 1. That aside, in terms of what's actually intended to be changed or what was shown within the appendix, nothing has actually changed. So what this amendment is proposing is several updates because our bylaws have a conflict with our Constitution in terms of how we actually are approving or electing some student government officials. For example, I think just moments after I was approved as parliamentarian, I raised an objection to Eden or Chair Thomas now when she was being appointed or not being appointed as ARC chair because that wasn't being, anyway, that wasn't constitutional, but it's what our bylaws had said. So that's one change. There was another change about how the president should technically be presiding over speaker selection, but they don't. It's always the outgoing speaker. So I said that, speaker selection should be a process established by the bylaws. I'm not sure if I want to go through every single example here, but those are the types of changes. Please, again, feel free to ask me any questions. And also the Appendix B would summarize some of these changes as well.
Could you clarify, are any of these changes new that are not already current practices? Like in the examples you just mentioned of things like speaker selection,
right.
It sounds like
No.
the items that are currently already in place, it's just adjusting those to fit what's already in place. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that actually is.
All right, is there any discussion on this motion?
Take me off. Sorry, I messed up.
Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, we will move into a vote by roll call when the deputy speaker is ready.
Okay, Senator Arinarkin, absent. Senator Bile, absent. Senator Chin. Sorry, you cut out. Can you say that again?
Yes.
Okay. Senator Spitoyevich.
Aye.
Senator Dillingham.
Yes.
Senator Fabres Cordero.
Aye.
Senator Fuchs.
Yes.
Senator Hathaway.
Yes.
Senator Ramirez is absent. Senator Sorokin.
Aye.
Senator Thomas.
Yes.
Senator Yoon.
Yes.
9 yeses, 3 abstentions.
All right, the motion passes. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve amendment proposal number 4.
Second on the motion?
Seconded.
Senator Hathaway.
Second.
All right. Once again, parliamentarian Sahan.
Right. So this one originally had the title clarify language from 1787 amendment. So there is lots of ambiguous language within our essay constitution. And one of the things was, what does 3/4 of the body mean? Which is just what Alexander and I were talking about. And so lo and behold, that is one of the things that's being updated in this amendment so that it is more clear. On top of that, there is clarification that of some other terms, but also implementing gender neutral language within our constitution. And I think that there's one other thing, which is that instead of, if students want to propose an amendment, let me start over. There's 2 ways right now in the status quo where students or the Senate can propose an amendment on the ballot. One of them is that 3/4 of the body of Senate can approve it, and then it's put on the ballot. The other way is that 1/5 of all Students Association members, so like of all of the student body, they can create an application to put it on the ballot. And so if you do the math, 1/5 of around our student body size is 1,300 students, which is in some cases more than what we actually get every year who vote and participate in the spring election. So it seemed a little bit of a high bar. So that particular threshold was reduced to 1/10. That was one thing that changed there. Another change, which wasn't specifically relating to clarification of wording, was just in the hypothetical that if there are 2 amendments being proposed on the ballot and they both technically pass, that the one with the highest number of affirmative votes would prevail. I think that, that's it. I yield.
All right. Is there any discussion on this motion? Senator Fabres Cordero.
Yes. As for the threshold, just a small comment. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but also I think it has to be mentioned. It kind of reduces a little bit the democratic legitimacy of elections, right? Especially with the justification given. I yield.
Is there any other discussion? Senator Thomas.
I yield to Micah Greenberg.
Yeah, so my initial thought was to sort of just pose the question of why really moving from 1/5 to 1/10 is necessary, and that's something that I think either way is arbitrary, but just what Senate thinks about that. So I was going to pose that as something that you should discuss. And then The other thing was I just kind of wanted Senator Fibres Cordero to expand upon what he meant by the by it challenging democratic legitimacy, because I didn't quite understand that point. So yeah, I just want those two things to be discussed a bit more.
Okay, yield.
All right. Any additional discussion? Seeing none,
Sorry, I'm in the list.
Oh,
But-
sorry. I thought you had lowered your hand. Okay. Yeah, Senator Fibres Cordero.
Thank you. So to clarify, what I mean is that by lowering the threshold and justifying it in a way that is already too close to our low turnouts, historical low turnouts, not like a problem of today or this generation. This has been a thing for so long, right? It kind of challenges the idea of like we are a duly elected body representing most of the people in the student body, right? It might seem like a small thing, but it doesn't sit perfectly well to me to change it that way. And since the student body will read it, and see, oh, they're lowering the threshold, I'm not sure it will cause, it will promote the greatest conversations amongst the students about like what it means to be us here as elected representatives. You know what I mean? I would rather have a higher threshold, and that also creates better incentives, I believe, to push for a better turnout. Right? If we make things easier, I'm not sure that gives the best incentives to try to solve the turnout problem in general. I yield.
I'm going to assume that you yield to Parliamentarian Sahin.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you. So, yeah, I think there's one clarification I need to make. So, there's two steps. Like I think for an amendment proposal to become an amendment of the Constitution. So the first step is there's two options. One of them is that the Senate by 3/4 of the body approves it, and then it would go on to the ballot where students vote on it. And so, or the other option after the first step is that it's like you can just imagine like pages of students who've signed off on it and say we want to see this amendment on our ballot. So either of those two options mean that the amendment is then going to go onto the spring election ballot. And at that point, you still need a majority vote of the number of students who are voting to actually approve it. So in terms of turnout at the election, that really isn't necessarily going to change regardless. The only thing that is changing is that the number of students required to like petition to put something on the ballot is being lowered. It still has to be supported by, again, the majority of people voting at that election. I yield back.
Senator Fibres Cordero, did you have anything to add to that?
I listen to the explanation. I cannot say I'm confident still of like that solves my issue of the underlying issue of like the change in the threshold itself and how the optics of it can affect us. I mean, I yield.
All right, Senator Thomas.
I yield to Micah Greenberg.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think turnout, especially this past election, was definitely lower, and now as a result of coronavirus. But I think before that, turnout was pretty decent. Technically, it was above 2,000 students, which technically is close to 1/3 only. But if you factor in the fact that seniors are eligible to vote, but a lot of them don't because they don't have a stake in what happens after, turnout, I would say, is pretty reasonable when it's not the pandemic. I think that the question that is reasonable I guess, is that obviously this year has been difficult for SA for a variety of reasons, one of which is the coronavirus causing voter turnout to be low, and sort of just these amendments are things that are long-term and are really difficult to reverse, and sort of figuring out whether, and this might have been something I should have brought up before the first two were decided to be put on the ballot, but figuring out whether it makes sense for this year to put things on the ballot that can have long-term implications. Yeah, just because of the strangeness of this year, and the question of whether this year itself is as representative as other years may be. But that's just one thought. I yield.
If parliamentarian Sahin wants to respond to that, I can yield to him.
Sure. So at this point, Micah, students will already be voting on 2 other amendments on their ballot. So I think that that's just what I wanted to say there. You're right that, some things are, this will be long-term. That being said, I think that we really haven't had the type of student engagement that we want, or student participation in general in our student government. So I think that having, requiring 1,300 students to say that they want an amendment is just an unreasonably high threshold. And again, this is only the threshold to put it on the ballot, where it still has to be approved by students. This really isn't trying to take away power from the Senate. It's, in my opinion, much easier to convince a number of senators to vote yes on an amendment than to get 650 students under this new threshold to sign off on something, because that takes a lot of work still. So I think that that recognition still needs to be put in context. I yield back.
I yield.
Senator Sorokin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to say that in regard to all the thresholds, I know that it is a bit like controversial topic, but I would like to say that from my understanding, it was very rare, or there was maybe like almost no cases when those high, like it's really hard to meet those high thresholds. And I doubt if that was a common thing that they were ever met. Like, I would ask like more senior members of the assembly of the gallery to kind of correct me if I'm wrong, but I doubt if there was any single time when of course, maybe there was one time, but those were really rare occasions when those thresholds were met. So that's why I would say that there is no reason to worry that now they are going to be lower and something something bad will happen. Like those thresholds have almost never been used in the past. So why would we think that lowering them now will change, like have some serious implications? I honestly think that there is no reasons to think so, and yeah, that's why I think that it is reasonable to lower them down, and it is reasonable to vote in favor of approving this amendment. I yield back to the floor.
Senator Febres Cordero.
Well, I would like to maybe reiterate and make more clear my point here. Yes, practically maybe changes nothing, but there's 2 things here I think are very important. First, the incentives we have. If we have less of a pressure, and there has been pressure in the past about like turnout, and I can attest to that multiple times. It never came to be an actual extremely pressing thing of like we are actually having a trouble with that, but it's always been a point of contention if things will turn out bad or not, right? So by lowering it, you create less incentives, you destroy incentives, right, to actually put effort into bringing them up. I disagree with the comment saying that we have pretty decent turnout. I think we institutionally want more engagement. For years, we have said that recent events really make us think we need more engagement. And one of those is having actual higher turnouts. So we need to, I mean, if you could put the push the threshold up, I would actually support that, because we really need to push ourselves into engaging with students and make them vote more. That's one thing. Second is the optics again. I spent years, even before my time in SA, hearing that, oh yeah, not that many people vote in SA elections. They're always like tabling. They want people to vote. Like not many people have really interest. We need to change that. And even if it's symbolic in a sense, it doesn't change much things directly. The optics of it might not sit well with part of the student body that will read it thoroughly and say, huh, that's weird, right? Or that sounds like they're trying to like cover for themselves institutionally. So I think uh, even if it's just one part of this amendment, I cannot really in good conscience support it for that. We cannot really like take that direction as a student government if we prize ourselves in being the democratic representatives of the student body. I yield.
Just as a note, you are aware that it doesn't change the requirement to pass in an election vote, right? Like you're aware that it's the part that is in a petition from the student body, the number of signatures required on the petition to have it placed on the ballot.
Right, but I consider both forms of democratic expression, and the way you read it can be put as basically a form of vote.
Okay, Senator Sorokin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to address what Cesar said. Cesar, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, which is I understand this point with kind of that if we lower the thresholds, it kind of may disencourage some people from, let's say, participating in the election. But at the same time, we are like the conversation, Senator Fabres-Cordero emphasized on the kind of turnout and everything. Like the goal of lowering down the thresholds is that there is actually more engagement within the student government, within the SA, that there can be, that it's easier to actually, operate within the student government. And honestly, I think that on the contrary, like to what Senator Fabres-Cordero said, it will actually, decreasing these thresholds may actually increase the engagement and increase the actual student engagement in student government, because they will see that there's like less of bureaucratic barriers to achieve some things. Because if we lower down thresholds, then the things to which they apply also becoming easier to actually get done. I hope everyone here understands what I'm trying to say, right? If the thresholds for any change, like I'm not even going into the details because those thresholds are being changed for a variety of things. Like if the threshold is very hard for some, like anything, doesn't matter what, then to make this change becomes harder, which maybe in turn be very discouraging for some people who actually want that change to happen. So even though I totally understand the point that Senator Fabres-Cordero made, and it's kind of interesting point, I still think that lowering down the threshold will actually encourage all the students to be part of be active member of SA and probably a member of SA government. I yield back to the floor, or I actually yield to Senator Fabres-Cordero if the senator has something to respond or something else to say in that regard.
Yes, I mean, actually, I would like to respond and then yield to someone else. So I guess it's better if you yield back and then yield to me.
I yield back to the floor.
All right, Senator Fabres-Cordero.
So yes, I mean, of course, maybe the comparison, first of all, between like votes in elections and the signatures is broad, but I think still it stands as democracy. Second, I think that making it more open by lowering the threshold isn't really that democratic, because in order to bring something and to make students actually put effort, you really need to have a sort of representative, amount of the student body. You know, this kind of petitions need to have a certain threshold to push an actual engagement of the issue with the student body. So we have a discussion. It's not a niche group of people, but it's actually the whole campus discussing it. By having a higher threshold, you move people to do that. I would like to yield also to Chief Justice Sandagata.
Thank you, Senator Progres Cordero. I think it may be helpful to attempt to recenter the discussion here. So as I see it, this amendment makes it easier to propose amendments to have them show up on the ballot. A key question that the Senate, I believe, should be discussing and asking itself is, if this leads to more amendments, is it a good thing that there are more frequent amendments? Speaking honestly, I'm not sure if that's necessarily a good thing. I think there are a few places you can look at for similar like situations, right? You can look at other schools where there are really long constitutions with additional amendments added on, potentially with a more, this is a form of direct democracy, right? You want people to be able to propose amendments, where potentially their constitutions are longer. On the other hand, you can look at constitutions that are shorter. If you really didn't want to make it generalizable, you could also look at the state level where there are like very, very long constitutions where that's built into their constitution that it's really easy to add an amendment, and states where that's harder to do so. So I think that that's really what the Senate probably should be considering when it's considering passing, putting this amendment on the ballot, is what is the added benefit of making a more engaged process where it's easier to get things on the ballot, and what would the future of amendments look like with our Constitution? I hope that follows. I yield.
Yes, I welcome that point. Not exactly the same line I'm taking, but I also agree that to me, the obfuscation could be enough to like justify a vote in the negative. I yield back. Thank you.
Senator Hathaway.
Motion to move to previous question.
Is there a second on that motion? That means moving to a vote right now, as opposed to continuing discussion. I'm going to assume that if you're moving to previous question, anyone who was already on the speakers list would be able to finish, but that after that point, we would move to the end of, we would sort of, well, actually, I'll ask just for clarification. Are you looking to move immediately to previous question, or are you looking to close the speakers list? Because I think those are arguably two different motions. Closing the speakers list means we continue the discussion of the people that are on the speakers list, and then we move to a previous question, or moving to previous question means we stop discussion and move to a vote right now.
Yeah, close the speakers list. Yep.
Okay. So there's been a motion to close the speakers list. Is there a second on that motion?
I second the motion.
Senator Thomas. All right. Is there any discussion? No, we're just going to move right into a vote by unanimous consent. Is there any dissent on closing the speakers list? Seeing and hearing none, speakers list is closed. Senator Hathaway, you have the floor.
I yield.
Senator Sorokin.
Motion to postpone the discussion of the current amendment until the next Senate meeting for all the reasons, for the need of more conversation, discussion about the current amendment.
Can I interpret that as a motion to table the motion to approve Amendment 4?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Is there a second on that motion? Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
All right, Senator Hathaway. Is there any discussion on tabling the motion to approve amendment proposal 4? Seeing and hearing no discussion, we will move to a vote by unanimous consent. Why not? So essentially, is there any dissent on tabling this until a future Senate meeting? Seeing and hearing no dissent, the motion passes. It is tabled. Is there a motion? Senator Svetojevic.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded by Senator Thomas. Is there any dissent on the motion to adjourn?
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm not sure, but I think that Senator Thomas had something to say before we adjourned the meeting.
No, it appears Senator Thomas is okay. Senator Thomas is upset that I did not call on Senator Thomas for the motion to adjourn.
Oh, I apologize then, Mr. Speaker.
All right, is there any dissent on the motion to adjourn? Sorry, Eden. All right, seeing and hearing no dissent, we are adjourned. Thank you for coming.